In today's video, I'm going to be introducing expressions and equations. So here I've got an example equation to show you what different terms we use in algebra to describe certain aspects of expressions and equations. Now you can see that my page is full of notes, or notes that I would have put on the board. So what I'll do is I'll leave my page like this. You can pause me here, take a screenshot, or copy it down in your book. And then I'll also show you the bottom of my page. So again, pause me, write it down in your book, take a screenshot, and then press play once you've copied everything down. Okay, so expressions and equations. Now, this is an equation. We'll get back to that in a moment, but first, let's describe every part of this equation. Now, let's go here to the far left in pink. This word is pronounced coefficient. You may have heard of these terms before, or you may just need to refresh your memory. A coefficient, this is pointing to this number 12 that is attached to this n. So the whole entire term is 12n, but just the 12 part we call a coefficient in algebra. Now, a coefficient is a number stuck in front of a variable. Okay, so I've given you more examples. If we had 2x, just the 2 would be a coefficient. If we had the expression 5 plus 9y, just this 9 would be the coefficient. So what trend are you finding? In non-maths terms, I guess you could say, a coefficient is a number that's stuck next to a letter, okay? But if we're talking algebra, we'd say stuck in front of a variable, okay? So let's move on to what a variable is so you can understand that. The variable in this equation would be this n, okay? The n would be an example of a variable. And a variable is a letter that can have different values. Now, what I mean by that is this letter n could equal 0, n could equal 5, n could equal 102, n can equal -3, n can equal 3 squared, okay? Any value or any number can be substituted into this n to let it equal something else, okay? But a variable is just a letter, okay? In this case, n. Here I've got some other examples as well. I've got p, q, and then if we had 9u, just the u part would be a variable, okay? The 9 would be a coefficient, okay? So they're coefficients and variables. Now let's move on to purple. I'll just move my page up a bit. Okay, the 14 and the 40 in this equation is what we call a constant. Now let's go down to purple. A constant is a number by itself. It's got nothing next to it. It's got no variables next to it. It is just a number by itself on its lonesome. Okay, here I've got some other examples as well. If I had the expression 22 plus x, just the 22 would be a constant because that's the number by itself. If I had the equation 2x plus 5 equals 25, the 5 and the 25 would be a constant because they're just numbers by themselves. They've got no letters attached to them, nothing else. They're just numbers by themselves. And that's what a constant is. Now up here in orange, I'm pointing to all three parts of this equation because they are all called a term. So 12n is a term, 14 is a term, 40 is a term. Okay, so a term is every part that makes up an expression or equation. Okay, So my two examples here are the expression 7p plus 1. Now the 7p is considered one term and the 1 is considered another term. Okay, this doesn't get separated when we're talking about terms. It's one thing. So this term, 7p, is made up of a coefficient and a variable, and that makes up one term overall. In my second example, we've got 9x plus 5y plus 10 equals 28. So the 9x, the 5y, the 10, and the 28 are all called terms. If you wanted to break this down further, this 9 would be a coefficient, this x would be a variable, this 5 would be a coefficient, this y would be a variable, this 10 would be a constant, this 28 would be a constant. But if we're talking about terms, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms in this equation. Okay? So make sure you're copying these notes in your book. Go back to the start of the video to pause me again if you need to. Now, the last two terms, expressions versus equations. Expressions have no equal sign in them, okay? No equal sign. Whereas equations do have equal signs. That is why my example that I wrote up here is called an equation, because it has an equal sign in it. If I got rid of this part and I just had 12n plus 14, this would be an expression because there's no equal sign. But the second I make it look like this, it becomes an equation because there is an equal sign. Okay? So now let's practice with some questions that are very similar to what you guys need to do for this week's learning task. So, question 1, circle the equations. Now remember, equation, they have equal signs. So we're looking for all the things here that have equal signs in them. This one has an equal sign, so it's an equation. No equal sign, no equal sign. This has an equal sign, so it's an equation. No equal sign. So 2 of them are equations. Okay? Let's familiarize ourselves with terminology from algebra, even though the question doesn't ask for it. This 7 would be a coefficient. Okay? The number in front of a letter. This letter here, the y, is a variable. This 9 is a number by itself, so it's a constant. 18 is a constant as well. And 7y, 9, and 18 are all terms of this equation. 17 is the coefficient. W is the variable. 20 is a constant. 17y and 20 are terms in this equation. Okay. Question 2. Write an expression for each statement below. Let x be the number. So we're writing expressions. That means no equal sign. Expressions don't have equal signs. So you're going to write an expression for all of these here using x as the unknown number. So for more than a number, you need to think to yourself, what is more another word of? Does more mean subtracting or taking away? Does it mean dividing? Does it mean adding? Does it mean multiplying? Does it mean squaring, square root? What does more mean? That's the hardest part of questions like this, figuring out which sign you're meant to apply to the question. Once you figure that part out, the rest of it is easy, okay? So for more than a number, is the same as 4 plus x. So x is the unknown number. So this number, this imaginary number, is the x that I've written down here, and we want 4 more than it. Okay, so you'd write plus, because more means plus. 4 more than a number. Okay. B, 2 is subtracted from a number. So subtracted, which sign does that belong to? Well, subtract is another word for take away, and 2 is subtracted from a number. So the order where you put the 2 and the x is crucial. The 2 is being subtracted from a number. So it's that number minus 2. 19 divided by a number. Again, crucial. Divided means obviously divide, and then 19 is being divided by a number. So that would be 19 divided by x, but I don't really have much space there. You could also write it like this. Okay, that's just slanted because I don't have any room, but that's how you write your answer. Okay. And last one, 12 times a number and then 5 is divided. So there's 2 parts. What sign is this? What's times? We'll obviously multiply. And what is divided? We'll obviously divide. So 12, let's do the first part first. 12 times a number. So 12 times a number. And then 5 is divided. So I guess you could write this and then do that on the same line. But because of the way that it's written, you would write it like this, because the 12 is being multiplied, and after you get that answer, 5 is divided. Whereas here, because we don't have brackets, it may be not as obvious to know which one to do first. Do we do x divided by 5 first, then multiply by 12, or do we do this part first? No, so don't write it like this. You need to get into the habit of writing it like this. And then you can make that look like that. Okay, so we can get rid of the time sign and just put the 12 and the x together, because we know that no gaps between 2 things means imaginary time sign. Okay, you can pause this again if you want to write down the answers. And last question. Circle the coefficient, underline the variable, and put a square around the constant. Okay, circle the coefficient. Coefficient, number that is stuck in front of a letter or a variable. So here, 21 would be the coefficient. Underline the variable. Well, a variable is a mathematical term for letter. So I'll underline the x and put a square around the constant. The constant is a number by itself. So the 7 is the only thing that's by itself. Now this is an expression because there's no equal sign. And this expression has 1, 2, 2 terms. All right, last one. We're circling the coefficient. In this example, there are 2 coefficients, the 2 and the 4, because they're the numbers that are stuck to the letters. Variables, there are also 2. So variables just mean the letters. So P and Q. And there are also 2 constants. So the 12 is by itself, and so is the 1. And this is an equation because it has an equal sign. All right. Now I'll leave this like this too, so you can pause and copy down the answers if you need. And that's it.